Welcome to the third breakdown video of my Mardini submissions. In this video, we will have a look how to set up a basic grain simulation, how to animate a fish with KineFX and curve deformers, how to upraise your grain simulation, and how to use Solaris and Karma for rendering. The node of the day was Vellum grain. Let's see how this node was used. If you look at the setup, you see it's actually quite small and it's not very complicated. Let's start with the base shape. Here I created a box, deleted the upper part, used a poly extrude to create the walls, and a poly bevel to round the edges. Then I imported some free sketch fishes, used the match size to bring it to the center, isolated the one fish, and again a match size transform to orient it along the z-axis. Then I created some basic shitty UVs. You see, it's not very professional, just some basic UVs. Use the rig doctor to initialize the transforms and to reorient the child. But you see I get some issues with the orientation, so I use the orient joints to rotate them along the curve. Joint capture by harmonic to create the joint weights for each joint we just created with the skeleton sub. Then the rig. The first rig pose is just a rotation of the fish, 180 degrees. And the second one uses a sin function based on $f. $f is the actual frame you're at. So if you look at this, you see I'm on 1025 and you have this one here too. And sin $f multiplied by 10, this is useless, multiplied by 10 means you have the sin motion and based on the actual frame multiply by 10, so it's a little bit faster. This is the basic animation, and you can multiply it, let's say, by 50 and it's faster. Put it back to 10 and create a more realistic look without rigging and animating the rest of the fish. I use the secondary motion to create this small lag and overshoot effect. We can have a look at here. It's the same setup, $f, but I just multiplied the effect by 5, so it's a little bit stronger. And in here, I also use the effect lag and overshoot and have effect multiplier by 5. And you see the effect. It's really cool. Without and with. Then I created a curve, used a resample to smooth it, and a carve to have this cool animation. I never really used a path deform before, but it's actually a really helpful and interesting node. With this you can copy your geometry onto the curve and have some taper effect or rotation effect on the path itself. If you look at this, let's have a look at, yeah, here. You see it follows the curve. And with the rotation enabled, with the rotation deformation enabled, you can animate this parameter to just rotate the fish. You see here, it rotates around 360 degrees. Then I have 3 outputs here. One is just an isolated point on the fish, just one simple point. I use this later for the camera, so the camera always directs to the fish and focuses on the fish wherever I point the camera. The second one is the original fish model. I use a subdivide to create a more high-res mesh. Added some normals, then a point velocity to create the velocity, to have some motion blur when I render it, and a color. And here I created a VDB, an SDF, to use this as a collider in the grain simulation. For the grain simulation, I created a simple box which fits into the base shape here. Then I use a grain source to create the actual particles. If you increase or decrease this point separation parameter, you get more points or less points, and your p-scale also changes. If you increase it, you get a bigger p-scale and less points, and if you decrease it, you get a smaller p-scale and more points. So it's like the resolution of your grain simulation you can change here. The rest is just default settings. In the Vellum constraints, I use the basic settings and I just enabled attraction weight and repulsion weight. To attraction weight makes it more sticky, so the sand sticks more together, so they are not falling apart. But yeah, sticking together. On the Vellum solver, I use 5 substeps. And in the advanced tab, I enabled auto sleep. So if they are outside of the threshold, they are not activated and they sleep. So they stay at their position. And I told you how I use this VDB here. And in the Vellum solver, I use the pop awaken and I point it to my VDB and I enabled awaken by nearby particles. So only particles close to the BDB, so let's say close to the fish model, are activated, and the rest is just sleeping. So you only have a simulation around your area here, and you can change these parameters to make the radius bigger or smaller. And yeah, just playing around with this node is really cool and helpful. Have a look. You see how you get some nice motion here, and the sand looks like it sticks together. It moves slightly, but they don't fall apart. So yeah, they just stick together. To increase your grain simulation resolution, SideFX provides a really cool little setup. You have to select your OBJ network and press this upres send here, and you get these 3 or 4 nodes. And it upres your grains and particles in a really cool way. The first one creates a vector 4, and the second node is a point replicate. It's basically just scattering around your input geometry some more points. You have this parameter here, and if you keep your inputs and you have 1 point per point, you have twice as much points. So if you have 1 million points and you use this setup here with 1 point, you have 2 million. It's like a multiplier, and you have a more dense uh, grain simulation. And in here, it uses your p-scale and the packing density to make the points smaller just to don't have any intersection with more points. Very cool setup and great way to increase your resolution of your sand. For the coloring part, I created a seed attribute based on a random PT value, and I can use this attribute in a color sub, and the color type is ramp from attribute, and I use this sand color here to create some nice sand looking colors. In Solaris, I use the sub import to bring in my grain simulation and my fish, and I use the sub create to create a grid to have just a basic floor here. For the fish, I use the grayscale gorilla wood texture, and for the grains, I just use the basic material with my color value I import here. CD attribute is not called CD in Solaris, it's called display color, and you can use a ramp to change the colors and just drive your base color in the material node. I also used a roughness map to have a more interesting roughness texture on the grains itself. The lighting is actually just a dome light from Grayscale Gorilla, just a room lighting here to have some nice shadows and reflections. For the camera setup, I used the parent constraints. So the camera follows and looks to a specific point. For this, you have to create a empty primitive here, a primitive node, and then I just rotate the primitive around its own axis. You see this here, just a basic rotation around the y-axis. And then I created my camera. Just place it wherever you want, and then you can use the parent constraints. You have to put your camera in here in the source and your primitive into the target tab here, and then your camera follows this, so it moves around the primitive here, so you get some nice camera motion. I'm still not a big fan of animating the camera in Solaris. I ran into some issues and it's not very fast and efficient, at least for me, but I'm not sure if other people have the same problems. I I like to do the camera work in subs and just bring in your camera with a camera scene import cameras. And yeah, it's for static camera movements or just for a still camera, it's perfectly to work in Solaris. Then I copied this setup a few times to have different camera positions for the final video. Thank you for watching the breakdown, and I hope you could learn something, and I see you in the next one.